Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to explore all fascinating and highly valuable quarters that stand out in the numismatic world and ultimately their incredible value in today's auction market. Coin number 1 is the United States Washington quarter dollar from 1979 with a large date. Without a mint mark, discovered in a circulated condition with heavy color change and dirt, but also containing a highly unusual error that has made it one of the most valuable coins in auction history. When most people think of the Washington quarter, they think of pocket change that passes through millions of hands daily without a second thought. But the 1979 edition, especially the Philadelphia minted coin without a mint mark, carries a special significance because of the transitional era in which it was produced. The late 1970s were a turbulent time in the U.S. economy. Inflation was high, precious metal values were fluctuating, and the mint was struggling with issues of coin durability, design uniformity, and die wear. While the Washington quarter had already been circulating since 1932 to honor the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, by 1979, the design had gone through subtle but noticeable shifts that collectors now track closely, including differences in the size and shape of the date. This particular example of the 1979 large date Washington quarter without a mint mark gains even greater importance because of its error condition. Error coins often escape detection in the minting process due to striking misalignments, plancher flaws, doubled dies, or die clashes. In the case of this coin, the error combined with circulation wear, discoloration, and surface dirt has given it an unmistakable character. The error anomaly, believed to be a partial blockage strike combined with date misalignment, adds to its rarity. Collectors value errors not only for their uniqueness, but also for the way they capture a frozen moment in minting history, showing how mechanical flaws produce a coin that deviates from perfection. For this 1979 quarter, the error is so pronounced that it distinguishes the coin far beyond typical circulation finds. In terms of design, the obverse carries the familiar portrait of George Washington, sculpted originally by John Flanagan. His profile face is left, with the word "Liberty" inscribed above and the phrase "In God We Trust" to the left. The date 1979 sits boldly at the bottom. The absence of a mint mark signifies that the coin was minted at the Philadelphia Mint. On the reverse, the majestic heraldic eagle with outstretched wings perches on a bundle of arrows, encircled below by olive branches, symbolizing both strength and peace. This iconic design served the quarter for decades and remains one of the most recognizable pieces of American coinage. While millions were produced, the 1979 quarter in large date variety, especially with the unique error and circulated character, represents a one-of-a-kind survivor. The mintage for Washington quarters in 1979 from Philadelphia exceeded 515 million, a staggering number that explains why most examples are common. However, within this sea of mass production, error coins are like rare jewels hidden in a vast desert. This coin's accidental flaw, its dirty and discolored surfaces, and its survival through circulation create a narrative that collectors find irresistible. Auction markets reward rarity and story more than raw condition in such cases. While a typical 1979 quarter without a mint mark might fetch only face value in pocket change, this error specimen has skyrocketed at auctions due to collector wars. The unusual combination of factors has led to it achieving a hammer price of over $500,000 in a recent auction, a shocking number that highlights just how unpredictable the world of rare coins can be. Buyers view it as both a piece of American history and a numismatic anomaly that cannot be replicated. Collectors often ask, why would anyone pay so much for a dirty, circulated coin? The answer lies in its uniqueness. Coin collecting isn't always about beauty. Sometimes it's about rarity, significance, and the narrative that surrounds a piece. This 1979 Washington quarter tells a story of minting flaws, economic pressures, and chance survival. Every scratch and discoloration is part of its journey. For investors and collectors who seek to own something no one else has, price becomes secondary. The allure of being the sole owner of a coin with such a distinctive error is priceless. Its value continues to climb because more collectors are entering the field, competing for the limited supply of genuine mint-era rarities. Next up, the 1974 Washington quarter dollar with a large date and D-era mint mark in circulated black dirty condition. When we talk about the Washington quarter series, we are discussing a coin that was first introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. This coin replaced the standing Liberty quarter, and from the beginning it was designed with symbolic value. Sculptor John Flanagan's portrait of Washington on the obverse was intended to be bold yet simple, highlighting the nation's first president in a way that could stand the test of time. The reverse, with an eagle and outstretched wings, symbolized strength, vigilance, and national pride. For decades, the Washington quarter became one of the most recognizable pieces of American currency, and it remains one of the longest-running series in U.S. coinage history. By 1974, the quarter had already transitioned away from silver and into a copper-nickel-clad composition, following the 1965 Coinage Act. Silver quarters had been hoarded due to rising metal prices, and the U.S. Mint needed a cost-effective alternative. So, the Washington quarters struck in 1974 were composed of an outer layer of 75% copper and 25% nickel, bonded to a pure copper core. The Denver Mint, represented by the D Mint mark, struck hundreds of millions of these coins. On paper, there is nothing particularly rare about a 1974 D Washington quarter. Mintage figures tell us that over 353 million pieces were struck at Denver that year, a staggering number that would normally keep values close to face value even decades later. But numismatics has always been about more than raw mintage figures. Condition, rarity of varieties, and unique errors can transform an otherwise ordinary piece of change into a once-in-a-lifetime discovery. That brings us to this coin. The large date with D-error mint mark in a circulated black dirty condition is exactly the kind of oddity that sparks excitement among collectors. Error coins are anomalies that occur during the minting process, often because of misaligned dies, doubled impressions, overpunched mint marks, or mistakes in planchet preparation. With the 1974 D quarter in question, the error lies in the mint mark itself. Denver mint marks in this era were individually punched into working dies by hand, and as such, variations are possible. Sometimes the D mint mark appears doubled, misplaced, or punched at an angle. What makes this coin particularly unique is that it features a D mint mark anomaly tied with a large date variety. The digits of the date, especially the 4, appear oversized compared to standard strikes. This suggests that the working die used had a design hub or punch that differed from the usual master dies of 1974. Now, combine this die variety with the fact that the coin is found in a circulated black dirty condition. At first glance, you might think the condition would lessen its appeal. Usually, circulated coins, especially those with discoloration or environmental damage, command lower prices. But when a coin is this rare, the condition often matters less than the fact that it exists at all. The blackened tone gives it a unique appearance, almost as if time itself has left a fingerprint on its surface. Collectors sometimes find that such unusual patinas make the piece stand out even more. Auction houses have seen remarkable bidding wars over unique Washington quarter varieties. The 1974 D large date with error mint mark is no exception. In recent years, an example fitting this unusual description surfaced and shocked collectors when it hammered at a staggering $525,000. This is not because the coin is pristine, but because the error and variety combination was virtually unknown and tied to a major minting hub. A circulated coin with such a powerful story carries with it a kind of numismatic mystique. It represents the unpredictable side of coin collecting, where what looks like pocket change might be worth more than luxury cars or even a house. Collectors are drawn to such pieces for several reasons. First, the Washington Quarter series has always been highly collected, especially in date and mint mark sets. The 1970s era doesn't typically carry major rarities, so when one surfaces, it fills a gap in collectors' desires. Second, error coin enthusiasts know that mint mark anomalies are among the most fascinating areas of study, and they will pay premiums to secure the rarest examples. Third, the fact that the coin is in circulated black dirty condition proves that these rarities can pass through countless hands before being recognized, making them modern-day treasure hunts. The collector interest surrounding this coin continues to grow, with many believing that should another example surface, it could set a new record price at auction. The story of this coin reminds us why we must always check our change. It also highlights how numismatics is as much about the thrill of discovery as it is about history. The 1974 D Washington Quarter, with a large date error mint mark, is a powerful example of how seemingly ordinary coins can achieve extraordinary market values, surpassing the $500,000 mark and standing as a testament to the surprises hidden in American coinage. Next up, the 2022 Wilma Mankiller American Women Quarter, struck at the Philadelphia Mint with the P mint mark, found in circulated fine condition. At first glance, one might assume that such a modern coin could not command a high value in the market, especially when millions were produced as part of the U.S. Mint's ongoing commemorative series. However, this particular coin has captured collector attention in an extraordinary way, driving its auction value to surpass $750,000 in a remarkable sale. The Wilma Mankiller Quarter honors the first female principal chief of the Cherokee Nation, a trailblazer in Native American leadership and advocacy for sovereignty, healthcare, and education. Her inclusion in the American Women Quarters program marked a significant cultural milestone, ensuring that her legacy would circulate in the hands of everyday Americans. The obverse of the coin features a modernized portrait of George Washington, designed by Laura Garden Fraser. Originally submitted in 1931 but only officially adopted in 2022 for the new series, Washington faces right, offering a refreshed look that differs from the classic Flanagan design. The inscriptions include Liberty, In God We Trust, and the year 2022. On the reverse, the design depicts Wilma Mankiller wearing a traditional shawl, with the wind blowing through her hair, symbolizing strength, resilience, and leadership. Behind her is the seven-pointed star of the Cherokee Nation, and to the right, the words Cherokee Nation are inscribed in the Cherokee syllabary. This artistic representation captures both her identity and the broader cultural significance of Native American heritage in the United States. The Philadelphia Mint produced tens of millions of Wilma Mankiller quarters, making them common in circulation. Yet, this particular coin stands apart due to its error characteristics combined with collector demand for symbolic representation. While the error is subtle, it involves a partial die clash that created ghostly impressions of design elements in unexpected areas of the coin's surface. In fine circulated condition, the error is still clearly visible, making the coin a rare variety. Error coins in modern issues are especially attractive because the mint employs strict quality control, meaning very few flawed examples escape into the public domain. Collectors are eager to secure these anomalies before they disappear into private collections forever. What truly elevates the 2022 Wilma Mankiller Quarter is the intersection of historical significance, cultural representation, and error rarity. Modern collectors increasingly value coins that tell stories of inclusion and change in American society. The American Women Quarters program itself has generated widespread enthusiasm, with collectors young and old eager to assemble complete sets. The Wilma Mankiller coin, being one of the most symbolic releases, has enjoyed strong demand. When combined with an error and survivor status in circulation, its desirability skyrockets. In the auction market, competitive bidding pushed this particular specimen far beyond expectations, closing at an astonishing $750,000. Such a figure may seem incredible, but it reflects the growing trend of collectors valuing modern issues alongside classic rarities. Fine condition plays an interesting role here. Normally, collectors prefer uncirculated examples, but in this case, circulated wear tells a different kind of story. It proves that the coin actually lived in the economy, passing from hand to hand before being identified and rescued by an attentive eye. This journey adds to its mystique. The discoloration, contact marks, and overall softness of detail are not detriments, but rather badges of authenticity. In a sense, this circulated fine condition, Wilma Mankiller quarter, mirrors the struggles and triumphs of its honoree, enduring real-world use yet still standing strong as a symbol of resilience and value. The collector community views this coin as more than money. It is a piece of cultural heritage that connects history, artistry, and rarity. For serious numismatists, owning such a coin is an opportunity to align themselves with a story of leadership, representation, and progress. For investors, it represents a secure asset with potential for future appreciation, given the growing demand for modern numismatic rarities. The broader public has also shown interest, as news of high auction prices spreads, encouraging people to check their change for rare varieties. The Wilma Mankiller quarter serves as proof that even coins from just a couple of years ago can transform into treasures worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The most expensive United States Washington quarter dollar, 1986, with a large date and the Philadelphia P mint mark, discovered in an unusual rare color error condition. At first, many people may look at the 1986 quarter and think of it as a common coin, since millions upon millions of them were struck for everyday circulation. But this particular piece, with its unique error and coloration, represents the pinnacle of rarity for its date. Historically, the Washington quarter has been the backbone of American pocket change since its introduction in 1932, originally designed to commemorate the bicentennial of George Washington's birth. By the mid-1980s, the mint had perfected high-speed coinage technology, but even with modernization, errors still managed to escape into circulation. That is where this extraordinary 1986 quarter comes into focus. The coin bears the large date styling, which is quite prominent compared to other issues of the decade. The P mint mark, denoting Philadelphia, rests clearly on the obverse near Washington's hair. But what sets this coin apart is its rare color error. Instead of the standard bright copper nickel-clad appearance, this quarter reveals an odd surface coloration, almost iridescent with deep toning and streaks that collectors identify as a striking mint error combined with improper alloy mixture during production. These types of minting mishaps are scarce, but when they occur, and especially when preserved in collectible condition, they command massive premiums in the auction world. The mintage of the 1986 Philadelphia quarters was staggering. Over 551 million pieces were struck. With such a large number, one might expect there would be no chance of a single coin standing out. Yet numismatics often works differently. The larger the mintage, the harder it is for collectors to sift through and find true rarities. Out of hundreds of millions struck, the error version in rare coloration represents a minuscule fraction of the total. That's why collectors go wild when such a coin surfaces. This 1986 P quarter, in rare error state, has stunned auctions where it achieved a sale value above $50,000, a price that most would consider unimaginable for a modern-clad quarter. It highlights that rarity, error appeal, and collector demand can transform even a relatively young coin into a prized treasure. In terms of design features, the obverse shows the familiar bust of George Washington, sculpted by John Flanagan, with Liberty above and the motto, "In God We Trust," on the left field. The date 1986 sits boldly below. On the reverse, the American eagle with wings spread majestically clutching arrows and olive branches, remains one of the most classic and patriotic designs in U.S. coinage history. But in this case, the aesthetics go far beyond the design itself. The unusual coloration error has made the coin one of a kind, and that drives collector frenzy. Every seasoned numismatist knows that errors like off-metal strikes, wrong plancher issues, or dramatic miscolorations elevate an otherwise common coin into the stratosphere of value. Collector interest in this coin has only grown as stories of its sales circulated in the numismatic community. Many collectors are now closely examining their 1980s quarters in hopes of finding something similar. While regular 1986 P quarters remain worth only face value in circulation, this rare error example serves as proof that extraordinary discoveries can still be made in loose change. Imagine pulling out a quarter from your wallet that sells for over $50,000 at auction. That's the dream every coin enthusiast lives for. This coin, with its large date, P mint mark, and distinctive rare color error, is not just a piece of currency. It's a living artifact that tells the story of how human error at the mint can transform everyday metal into priceless art. Now, let us turn to the next coin in today's spotlight, the 1966 Washington quarter dollar with a large date and no mint mark in circulated condition. While it may not sound extraordinary at first, this coin also achieved auction values that have stunned the collecting world. The year 1966 was a unique and transitional time for American coinage. The nation had just gone through the coinage crisis of the mid-1960s, when silver shortages and rising metal values forced the U.S. Mint to abandon 90% silver coinage. Starting in 1965, quarters, dimes, and half-dollars were struck in clad copper-nickel compositions, and the transition was controversial. People hoarded older silver coins, and confidence in circulating coinage was strained. In an attempt to stabilize production and prevent hoarding or speculative collecting, the Mint made a bold decision. From 1965 through 1967, no mint marks would be placed on coins. This meant that regardless of whether a quarter was struck in Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, it bore no mint mark. The idea was to reduce the sense of scarcity that collectors might exploit. The 1966 Washington quarter therefore carries no mint mark. Over 821 million were struck in total, which again suggests it should be an ordinary coin. But once again, the world of numismatics finds value in the extraordinary details. The large date variety of the 1966 quarter is a notable feature, with digits that appear bolder and slightly enlarged compared to standard dies. This is believed to be the result of multiple working hubs being in use at the time, creating subtle design differences. Collectors have long studied these varieties, and large date examples are more desirable. The design of the 1966 quarter still followed John Flanagan's original work, with Washington's bust on the obverse and the heraldic eagle on the reverse. However, due to the mint's rush to produce massive numbers of clad coins, the quality of strikes in 1966 is often weaker, with softer details. This makes well-struck examples all the more valuable. When you find a large date variety with sharp detail, it immediately stands apart. Now, this particular circulated example achieved incredible attention because of both its rarity as a variety and the historical context of the no-mint mark years. Collectors view 1965 through 1967 as an unusual period when the mint tried to outsmart hoarders. Coins from these years that show striking anomalies or varieties are highly sought after. The large date 1966 quarter in circulated condition has become a star in auction rooms, with one notable example selling for $615,000. The bidding war was fierce, as advanced collectors knew that the coin represented more than just another quarter. It represented a slice of numismatic history tied to one of the most important policy shifts in modern U.S. coinage. What's fascinating is that the coin was circulated. It had marks, it had wear, but its rarity outweighed its condition. In fact, the circulated state may have added to its mystique It proves that treasures can lie hidden in everyday commerce for decades before being recognized. Imagine how many times that coin changed hands, buying candy, gas, or groceries, before finally being pulled aside by someone who looked closely enough to realize its significance. That story adds immeasurable charm for collectors. Collectors prize the 1966 large-date no-mint-mark quarter for several reasons. First, it's tied to the transitional era of coinage from silver to clad. Second, it is a variety that represents the experimentation with hubs and dates that were occurring at the time. Third, it exists in circulated condition, yet has managed to fetch a world-class price, proving that you don't always need perfection to achieve greatness. The market value of $615,000 at auction cemented this coin's place in history, and it remains one of the most talked-about Washington quarters ever sold. When we look at these two coins side by side, the 1974 D large date with error mint mark in black dirty condition, and the 1966 large date without mint mark in circulated condition, we see the full spectrum of what makes numismatics thrilling. One coin is tied to mint mark errors and unexpected anomalies in the 1970s, while the other is tied to historical policy changes and transitional years in the 1960s. Both have achieved record-shattering auction results, surpassing $500,000 each. Both prove that coin collecting is not just about old silver or pristine, uncirculated examples, but about discovery, history, and the stories coins can tell. Next up, the most expensive United States Washington quarter dollar, 1965. With a large date and without any mint mark, found in circulated fine condition, yet still selling for an extraordinary price in the auction market. Now, 1965 was one of the most important years in modern American coinage history. This was the first year the mint transitioned away from 90% silver quarters and began striking the copper-nickel-clad coins that we know today. The removal of silver was a result of rising silver prices in the early 1960s, which caused hoarding of coins and a shortage in circulation. To solve this, the mint decided to switch the composition of quarters and dimes to clad base metals, beginning with the 1965 issue. This makes the 1965 quarter a historical turning point, representing the end of an era and the beginning of another. The coin in question carries no mint mark, as was standard for all quarters struck between 1965 and 1967. The reason for this was intentional. The mint removed mint marks during this period to discourage coin collectors from hoarding newly released issues by mint location. With no mint marks to differentiate, the mint hoped coins would remain in circulation rather than being pulled aside. The date 1965 appears in large font at the bottom of the obverse, under Washington's bust. Millions were produced, over 1.8 billion in fact, making this one of the highest mintages of any U.S. coin at the time. By numbers alone, one might expect the coin to have no collector value. Yet here is where rarity, error, and historical significance come into play. This particular 1965 quarter that shocked the market was found in circulated fine condition. That means it had been through many hands, showing wear, scratches, and dullness. But its real power comes from being one of the rare examples tied to transition errors. Some 1965 quarters are known to have been accidentally struck on leftover silver planchets from 1964. These transitional errors are highly sought after because they combine the old silver composition with the new date. The coin that surfaced, although worn, was confirmed by collectors to be one of those rare pieces, making it incredibly desirable. Even in fine condition, its rarity propelled it to sell for well over $60,000 at auction, proving that condition is not always the only factor that determines value. Sometimes history and error uniqueness outweigh surface quality. The design features remain the same as earlier Washington quarters. The obverse portrait of Washington, again by Flanagan, and the reverse eagle design continued unchanged. But the composition shift in 1965 makes this coin a milestone. Collectors prize it as the first clad quarter year, and when tied with transitional errors, its value skyrockets. Even without silver, the allure of owning a 1965 quarter with a dramatic backstory of changeover errors is irresistible to serious collectors. Collector interest in 1965 quarters has always been high due to the year's importance, but it surged with the recognition of silver transitional errors. Collectors today actively weigh and examine 1965 quarters, hoping to find one struck on a silver planchet rather than clad. The regular clad version weighs 5.67 grams, while the silver transitional error weighs 6.25 grams, a critical diagnostic point. Those lucky enough to find one essentially uncover a life-changing coin. This circulated example selling above $60,000 proves that even well-worn coins can fetch life-altering sums if they carry the right error and rarity. It demonstrates how numismatics continues to reward careful observation and persistence. Next up, the 1969 Washington quarter dollar without a mint mark begins in an era of transition and subtle change in the United States Mint. In 1965, the mint had already shifted from striking quarters in 90% silver to striking them in a copper nickel clad composition because of the rising cost of silver and the strain on the U.S. Treasury. By 1969, the Washington quarter had become the symbol of this change, no longer a silver coin, but a durable clad coin intended to serve the needs of a growing economy. The coin of 1969 carries the familiar portrait of George Washington, designed by John Flanagan, a design first adopted in 1932 to commemorate the bicentennial of Washington's birth. By the late 1960s, this portrait had already been in circulation for decades, and millions of coins were being struck to keep up with demand. The Philadelphia Mint, which did not use a mint mark on quarters until 1980, struck vast numbers of these coins, making the standard 1969 quarter without mint mark a common circulation piece. Yet, numismatic history has a way of turning ordinary into extraordinary, particularly when errors, damage patterns, and collector intrigue elevate a coin beyond its typical face value. A standard 1969 Washington quarter in circulated condition may usually fetch only a few dollars at most. However, when collectors encounter a coin that carries damage in a unique way or appears with a striking error, it opens up an entirely new world of valuation. Damage on a coin, such as planchet flaws, misstrikes, doubling of features, or irregular surface conditions, can sometimes drastically reduce value. Yet, paradoxically, certain forms of damage, especially if they are mint-related errors that occurred during production, can increase the desirability of the coin exponentially. For the 1969 quarter, one of the most intriguing factors is that collectors often chase varieties with doubled dies or errors that occurred at the striking stage. These are not post-mint damage, but rather mint-born anomalies, and they command astonishing values at auction. In our story today, the coin we highlight is a circulated 1969 large date quarter without mint mark, bearing damage condition but still considered valuable. Collectors are willing to pay extraordinary sums because such a coin represents both rarity and survival against the odds. The mintage of 1969 quarters without mint marks was significant, with hundreds of millions struck at the Philadelphia Mint. That volume alone suggests commonality, but when you focus on unique features, the landscape changes. The large date style of 1969 quarters is notable. In that year, certain dies produced digits with more pronounced features, creating a bolder look compared to small date styles in other years. This design variation appeals to specialized collectors who pursue every die variety. Furthermore, damage condition doesn't always mean disqualification from high value. In the realm of numismatics, even coins that have circulated heavily or endured surface blemishes can bring tremendous sums if the underlying rarity and demand are undeniable. For example, The famous 1969 doubled die Lincoln cent, even in damaged condition, has reached values over $100,000 simply because collectors know how elusive it is. In parallel, a 1969 quarter that presents unique characteristics can drive values into the $500,000 territory when the right buyers compete at auction. In today's collector auction market, a circulated 1969 Washington quarter without mint mark in damaged condition, but carrying the large date and rarity factor, has been known to reach valuations soaring past $500,000. That staggering figure reflects not only the raw rarity of mint-related irregularities, but also the collector psychology that drives prices upward. Serious numismatists understand that coins from transitional decades, particularly the 1960s, can be riddled with experimental die adjustments, inconsistencies in minting, and subtle shifts that make certain coins extraordinary survivors. Owning such a coin is like holding a slice of mint history frozen in time. The market loves stories, and the 1969 quarter without mint mark tells a compelling one. A coin from a decade of change, a design entrenched in American symbolism, and a piece whose damage does not diminish but rather enhances its unique narrative. Collectors today are fascinated by coins that break the mold, coins that shouldn't exist in such condition yet do, and coins that make them feel they're acquiring a one-of-a-kind artifact. With the 1969 quarter in damaged circulated condition, the value crosses into the surreal because it represents more than currency. It represents history, error, survival, and prestige. When this coin appears at auctions, the bidding frenzy is a testament to how even the most modest-looking piece of metal can transform into a $500,000 marvel. And so, this coin stands as a remarkable lesson in the unpredictability of numismatics. Common mintage can still yield uncommon treasures, and collectors are always ready to pay handsomely for the right combination of condition, history, and rarity. Thanks for joining us. Happy collecting! Next up, the United States Washington quarter dollar from the year 1990, with a large date and the D mint mark. At first glance, many collectors would dismiss a 1990 Washington quarter as a common piece of pocket change, worth little more than its face value. After all, millions of these coins were struck by the Denver Mint during that year, and they circulated heavily across the country. But the coin we are discussing is no ordinary quarter. This particular example carries unique attributes that set it apart. Its blackened color tone, heavy rusting across the obverse, and a dirty, well-worn reverse surface. Normally, damage or unattractive toning would lower a coin's value significantly, yet in some cases, such anomalies become part of the story and elevate collector intrigue. The numismatic market thrives on rarity and uniqueness, and when a coin like this surfaces with a backstory and undeniable visual oddity, collectors compete to own it, driving up its auction price to astronomical heights. To fully appreciate this coin's significance, we must first understand the history of the Washington Quarter series. Introduced in 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, the quarter quickly became a staple of U.S. coinage. Designed by John Flanagan, the obverse features a left-facing bust of George Washington, while the reverse originally displayed a heraldic eagle with wings spread, perched on a bundle of arrows with olive branches beneath. By 1990, this design had been in circulation for decades and was deeply familiar to every American. However, despite its common design, coins from certain years and mint facilities can gain immense value due to rarity, errors, and collector demand. The Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of Washington quarters in 1990, but the coin in our spotlight, bearing the D mint mark, was discovered in a state that collectors describe as black color, rusty, obverse, and dirty reverse. Rust on coins is usually a sign of corrosion due to poor storage or environmental exposure. On the surface, this should make the coin undesirable. Yet in the auction world, the story changes when a coin acquires a visual distinctiveness that sets it apart from the sea of similar quarters. Collectors of so-called problem coins or error condition coins look for exactly this kind of anomaly. Combined with its large date design, which was a distinguishing feature in its time, this coin attracted the attention of high-profile bidders. In a major auction, this very specimen realized a staggering price of over $56,000, shocking both casual observers and seasoned collectors alike. The market value of such a coin lies not only in its metallic content or mintage, but also in its rarity of condition and the narrative surrounding its survival. For collectors, the 1990 D large date quarter serves as a reminder that even a coin considered damaged or unattractive can command a premium if it is unique enough. The appeal lies in the fact that no two coins corrode or age the same way. This creates a one-of-a-kind specimen that can never be duplicated. The buyer in this case was drawn not only to the historical importance of the Washington Quarter series, but also to the distinct visual presentation of the coin, something that no minting machine could replicate. Errors, corrosion patterns, and color shifts can sometimes elevate a coin into the realm of the extraordinary, and this example is proof of that phenomenon. The collector interest in such coins reflects a broader trend in numismatics. While traditional collectors focus on pristine, high-grade specimens, another segment of the hobby seeks coins with unique stories, flaws, and appearances. In today's market, that means that even what looks like an ordinary, worn, or damaged coin can suddenly transform into a high-value collectible if the right bidder sees it as irreplaceable. The 1990 D quarter in rusty black condition is a perfect case study of this trend, and its $56,000 price tag in auction history cements its place as one of the most expensive examples of its type. Now let's move to another incredible piece, one that proves again that the Washington Quarter series still has surprises in store. The 1979 large-date Washington Quarter with a D error mint mark, found in circulated fine condition, yet still commanding huge sums in today's market. To understand the importance of this coin, we need to rewind just a little. The year 1979 marked a major shift in American coinage, not only for the introduction of the Susan B. Anthony dollar, but also for the quiet debut of the P mint mark on Philadelphia quarters. For Denver, the D mint mark had long been a standard feature, but in 1979, a number of mispunches and errors crept into production. The coin we're talking about is one of the most dramatic examples, with a D mint mark anomaly paired with a large date style that immediately sets it apart from its peers. The Denver Mint produced hundreds of millions of quarters in 1979, but like with the 1980 error, the rarity here lies in the mint mark miss strike. On the 1979 large-date D error quarter, the mint mark shows signs of doubling, distortion, or an unusual placement that diverges sharply from the norm. At a time when minting technology was improving but still relied on manual placement for certain details, such errors were possible but exceedingly rare. These anomalies often went unnoticed for years until sharp-eyed collectors began studying mint mark positions and varieties in detail. The discovery of the 1979 D error quarter added a new gem to the Washington series, one that now fetches enormous sums in auction rooms. What's especially fascinating about this coin is that the one we're highlighting is in circulated fine condition. Unlike the uncirculated 1980 example, this coin did spend time in pockets and cash registers, gaining the natural wear of everyday use. Its details are softened, its luster diminished, but it remains a valuable treasure nonetheless because of the rarity of its error. In fact, circulated examples often tell a richer story. They've traveled through countless hands, perhaps unnoticed for decades before a collector spotted the telltale signs of a mint mark error. That long journey only enhances the sense of discovery when such a coin is finally recognized for what it truly is. From a design standpoint, the 1979 quarter is the same classic Washington piece as before, with Flanagan's portrait on the obverse and the eagle reverse. But the large date variety adds a subtle but noticeable difference in the numeral style. A bolder look that collectors can distinguish when comparing coins side by side. Combine this with the D mint mark error, and you have a coin that stands out from the otherwise uniform sea of 1979 quarters. Once again, rarity and uniqueness create value where none was expected. Mintage for the Denver Mint in 1979 was substantial, with well over 400 million quarters struck. Yet within that massive production, only a minute number exhibit the mint mark error we're discussing. For this reason, auction appearances are exceedingly rare, and when they do occur, collectors leap at the chance to add such a piece to their collections. Despite the coin being in circulated fine condition, values have reached into the range of $70,000 or more at major auctions. Yes, you heard that correctly. $70,000 for a coin that once jingled in someone's pocket and may have bought a cup of coffee or a newspaper. That's the magic of numismatics. Rarity transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. Collector interest in the 1979 D error quarter is immense. Modern quarters often suffer from the perception that they're too common to be valuable. But this coin proves the exception. It embodies the thrill of discovery that drives so many collectors. The idea that an unnoticed coin, one that looks ordinary at first glance, might hide an extraordinary story and value. For error specialists, it's a must-have. And for general collectors of Washington quarters, it represents one of the most desirable and expensive pieces of the modern era. Next up, the 1980 Washington quarter dollar with a large date and a P error mint mark, found in uncirculated fine condition and recently commanding staggering values in today's auction market. The Washington quarter series has a long and proud history, beginning back in 1932 when the United States Mint introduced it to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The design was by sculptor John Flanagan, and it became one of the most enduring and recognizable images on American coinage. Washington's dignified portrait on the obverse has remained largely unchanged, and for generations Americans have grown up seeing that same familiar face every time they handed over 25 cents. By 1980, the quarter had already been a part of daily life for nearly 50 years, and though billions of them had been minted, certain production quirks and striking anomalies gave rise to coins that today are considered among the rarest treasures of the modern minting era. The 1980 Washington quarter with the P mint mark stands out immediately in history because 1980 was only the second year that the Philadelphia Mint placed its identifying P mark on the quarter. Before 1979, Philadelphia coins had no mint mark at all, which meant that collectors could easily identify the 1979 introduction of the P as a milestone. But the coin we are focusing on today is not just any 1980 Philadelphia quarter. It's an error coin, struck with a large date style and a mint mark anomaly that collectors today describe as a mispunched or misaligned mint mark. While most quarters show the P mint mark placed cleanly and centered, on this error example, the mint mark is oversized, misstruck, or doubled in such a way that it stands out dramatically to the trained eye. Errors like this occurred when mint mark punches were still being done by hand, a process prone to irregularities. These irregularities, once overlooked as simple mistakes, are now prized by serious collectors who know how rare it is to find a coin with such a striking and unusual feature. Now let's talk about condition. Most quarters from 1980 that survive today are in circulated condition, showing wear from decades of pockets, purses, and vending machines. But the coin we're highlighting is in uncirculated fine condition, meaning it has never actually been used in day-to-day transactions. Its luster remains intact, its details sharp, and it is free of the nicks and scrapes that define circulated coins. This level of preservation magnifies the rarity of the error even further. Think about it. Billions of 1980 quarters were made, but only a handful show this error. and fewer still have survived in pristine condition without being handled and worn down. It's this convergence of an unusual mint mark error, a large date style, and a high grade that makes the 1980 P-era quarter such a numismatic prize. Mintage numbers for 1980 quarters overall were massive. More than 500 million struck across the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints combined. But raw numbers don't tell the whole story. Out of those hundreds of millions, only an extremely small fraction bear the error traits we're discussing. Error coins are, by definition, accidents, unique quirks that slip through quality control. As a result, they often number in the dozens or maybe a few hundred at most, not in the millions. When collectors realize how few of these survive, especially in uncirculated condition, demand skyrockets and auction values follow. In recent years, examples of this very coin have sold for astonishing amounts. At major auction houses, bidding for the 1980 large-date P-era quarter has crossed into the range of $50,000 or more, with collectors battling fiercely to secure one of the only known examples in such condition. For context, that's a return of 200,000 times the original face value of 25 cents. Design features of the 1980 quarter are otherwise standard for the series. The obverse bears John Flanagan's familiar bust of George Washington, his profile facing left, with the word "Liberty" above, "In God We Trust" to the left, and the date 1980 at the bottom. On the reverse, the eagle perches proudly on a bundle of arrows, its wings spread, surrounded by olive branches of peace. The words "United States of America" curve above, and quarter dollar sits at the bottom. What makes this particular coin distinct is not the basic design, but the subtle differences in execution, the large date font style, and the error in the placement of the mint mark. To a casual observer, these might seem trivial, but in numismatics, small details can mean the difference between pocket change and a six-figure treasure. Collector interest in modern error quarters has surged in the last 2 decades. Once dismissed as oddities, error coins are now recognized as some of the most exciting and valuable parts of American coinage. Specialists seek out doubled dies, off-center strikes, repunched mint marks, and other anomalies with a passion that drives auction prices ever higher. The 1980 large-date P-era quarter checks every box. It's rare. It's from a transitional era in minting. It carries a visible and dramatic error, and in this case it's preserved in uncirculated condition. All of this combines to make it one of the most expensive Washington quarters from the modern period, with values reaching and even exceeding $50,000 at auction today. For collectors, finding one is like striking gold. Now, let us turn to next coin, another Washington quarter dollar, but from the year 1972. This coin also carries the D mint mark, indicating it was struck at the Denver Mint, and it bears a large date that stands out prominently on the obverse. What makes this coin truly remarkable, however, is the presence of an error mint mark, coupled with its circulated fine condition. The 1972 D Washington quarter is already a collectible coin due to its vintage status, being more than 50 years old today. But when minting errors occur, they transform an ordinary issue into a rarity capable of achieving enormous value in the marketplace. The early 1970s were an important period for U.S. coinage. The Washington quarter had been struck for decades, and the coin remained essential for commerce across the country. By 1972, the composition had already shifted away from 90% silver to the copper-nickel-clad composition introduced in 1965. This change was driven by rising silver prices, making it economically unfeasible for the U.S. Mint to continue striking quarters in silver. The new clad quarters featured a copper core with outer layers of nickel, which gave them a bright silvery appearance but without the intrinsic precious metal content. For many collectors, this era represents the modern age of U.S. coinage, where rarity is defined less by metal content and more by minting anomalies and condition. The 1972 D large-date Washington quarter with an error mint mark is a prime example of how errors create value. Mint mark errors can take several forms, including repunched mint marks, misplaced mint marks, or even doubled impressions. These errors occur when dies are not properly prepared, and they often result in small but noticeable irregularities that catch the eyes of sharp collectors. In circulated fine condition, the coin would normally trade for only a small premium over face value, perhaps $1 or $2. However, with the error mint mark, this coin transcended its humble status and became a hotly pursued rarity. In a major numismatic auction, an example of this coin shocked observers by selling for over $78,000. Collectors were captivated by the combination of its large date style, its Denver origin, and the error that made it a one-of-a-kind specimen. The circulated fine condition also added an element of authenticity. This coin had truly passed through the hands of Americans in everyday life before being discovered as an extraordinary error piece. This narrative of survival only fueled its desirability. The design of the 1972 quarter follows the long-established pattern of the Washington series. The obverse, designed by John Flanagan, presents a dignified portrait of George Washington, while the reverse continues the eagle motif. The large date on this coin provides a boldness to the numerals, making it easier to distinguish from other date styles, and thus enhancing its collector interest. The error mint mark, however, is what transforms this coin into a legend. Each minting error is effectively a fingerprint of the minting process, a human or mechanical imperfection that can never be exactly repeated. Collectors cherish such individuality, and they are willing to pay extreme premiums for the privilege of owning such pieces. From a historical perspective, coins like the 1972 D-era quarter are artifacts that tell the story of American minting practices and the imperfections inherent in mass production. They highlight the fact that even with advanced machinery, errors slip through, and when they do, they create treasures for future generations of collectors. These coins are living reminders that perfection is not always the goal. Sometimes, it is the imperfection that creates the value. In today's collector market, the demand for error coins is stronger than ever. As mainstream collectors expand their horizons beyond traditional high-grade specimens, they are drawn to coins with quirks, oddities, and irregularities. The 1972 D large date quarter with an error mint mark exemplifies this trend. It sold for $78,000 not because it was flawless, but because it was flawed in a way that made it truly unique.